These are Hollywood's most catastrophic box office disasters that didn't just lose money, they landed people in prison. Productions proved that sometimes the real crime wasn't what happened on screen. This is the hidden criminal history of Hollywood's biggest gate, and the adventures of Pluto Nash involve no criminal wrongdoing despite catastrophic losses, and those were simply bad business decisions. The cases we're covering today are different because they involve fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, and money laundering that led to actual prosecutions and prison sentences. Organized crime infiltrating Hollywood finds its most notorious example in Deep Throat. This adult film cost just $22,500 to produce in 1972, and it went on to generate estimated revenues between $30 and $50 million, with some disputed claims reaching as high as $600 million. Here's what most people don't know. Those profits went straight into the pockets of the Colombo crime family. The Parretti family controlled the entire operation from top to bottom. Anthony, known as Big Tony, his brother Joseph, called the Whale, and Louis, nicknamed Butchie, used shell companies to control distribution and hide the money trail from federal investigators. And that's when the feds finally caught up with them. Anthony and Joseph were convicted in 1975 for conspiracy to distribute obscenity, and between 1976 and 1977, federal indictments in Memphis even included actor Harry Reams, which marked the first time the federal government had ever prosecuted an actor for obscenity. Anthony Parretti fled to Italy for 5 years before authorities finally captured him. A 10-month prison sentence plus a $15,000 fine came down in 1982. But here's the thing, the internal family dispute over profits proved even more dangerous than the legal consequences. On January 4, 1982, Carmine Persico allegedly ordered a hit on Anthony's brother Joseph and nephew Joseph Jr. in Brooklyn, which left Joseph Sr. paralyzed while Joseph Jr. didn't survive. The Parretti family's criminal enterprise extended far beyond adult films and into mainstream Hollywood. They created Bryanston Distributing Company, which would go on to distribute one of the most influential horror films ever made. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre became a landmark horror film in 1974 and earned over $30 million at the box office, making it one of the most influential genre films ever made. The cast and crew saw almost none of that money, and the reason involves the same criminal enterprise behind Deep Throat. Bryanston Distributing Company handled distribution, and despite the film's massive success, the cast and crew received approximately $8,100 split among 20 people. When investor Robert Kuhn demanded to audit the books to see where all the money went, Louis Parretti showed up flanked by muscular associates with a direct response. His exact words were, "You're not going to audit the books," and "You don't have the balls." Kuhn had no recourse whatsoever. Bryanston declared bankruptcy in 1976 amid federal obscenity charges, leaving a court judgment of $500,000 completely unpaid. The filmmakers who created one of cinema's most profitable independent films walked away with almost nothing while mobsters pocketed the profits, and this case illustrates exactly how organized crime operated in Hollywood's shadows during the 70s. They didn't need to make movies because they just needed to control distribution and keep the real profits hidden from everyone who actually did the work. The David Begelman scandal exposed something troubling about Hollywood's protective instincts toward powerful executives. Begelman held the position of president at Columbia Pictures in 1977 when his crimes came to light in the most unexpected way possible. Actor Cliff Robertson received an IRS 1999 form showing he'd earned $10,000 that year, but the problem was that Robertson had never received that money. LAPD and FBI investigations revealed that Begelman had been forging checks, and the total exceeded $80,000, defrauding Robertson, director Martin Ritt, and restaurateur Pierre Grosjean. What happened next shocked the industry, not the crime itself, but the response to it. Begelman pleaded no contest to forgery and embezzlement charges, and his punishment amounted to just 3 years of probation and a fine. His grand theft conviction was later reduced to a misdemeanor, and Kirk Douglas captured Hollywood's twisted priorities in his autobiography with these words: "This is the town where Cliff Robertson exposed David Begelman as a forger and a thief," with the net result that Begelman got a standing ovation at a Hollywood restaurant, while Robertson was blacklisted for 4 years. The victim became the villain in Hollywood's eyes, and Robertson found himself shut out of the industry for having the audacity to report a crime. By 1980, Begelman landed the CEO position at MGM with a contract worth $1.9 million, and he remained in the industry for years afterward. The message couldn't have been clearer because in Hollywood, exposing corruption carried a heavier price than committing it. The Cotton Club might be the most cursed production in Hollywood history, and Francis Ford Coppola's jazz-era gangster film had a budget between $47 and $58 million, but earned just $26 million domestically. That alone would make it a significant flop, but the real story involves what happened before cameras ever rolled. A tale of greed, organized crime connections, and a dispute over profits that turned fatal. Roy Radin worked as a millionaire promoter trying to arrange a 45% ownership stake in the film with producer Robert Evans. On May 13, 1983, Radin disappeared, and his remains were found a month later near Gorman, California. Investigators determined he'd been struck multiple times with dynamite used to hinder identification. The Cotton Club trial stretched from 1989 to 1991 and produced 4 convictions in total. Karen Delane Greenberger received life without parole for her role in the conspiracy, while William Menser faced conviction on first-degree offenses and potential capital punishment. Alex Marty and Robert Lowe also received life sentences for their involvement. Greenberger had operated as a drug dealer who expected a 50% profit share from the production. When Radin offered her only a $50,000 finder's fee instead, she orchestrated the entire scheme, and the financing itself raised additional red flags that suggested deeper criminal connections. The Dumani brothers, Las Vegas casino operators who were under Nevada Gaming Control Board investigation at the time, provided $30 million in financing for the production. They allegedly hired mobster Joseph Cusimano to intimidate Evans during the chaotic production. Producer Robert Evans earned the label Person of Interest in the investigation. When asked under oath if he knew Radin, Evans invoked his Fifth Amendment rights, and he was never charged. But the shadow of that production followed him for decades. The Cotton Club stands as a cautionary tale about what happens when legitimate Hollywood money mixes with criminal financing. Fortune magazine described Italian financier Giancarlo Parretti as an ex-waiter whose principal expertise was Ponzi schemes, not film. And yet somehow this man with no legitimate film industry credentials managed to acquire Cannon Films and then purchase MGM, one of Hollywood's most storied studios, for $1.3 billion in 1990. The acquisition quickly collapsed into documented fraud that would take years to fully unravel across multiple countries and court systems. Criminal convictions eventually came from multiple jurisdictions spanning 3 countries. A Paris court found Parretti guilty of misuse of corporate funds and fraud in March 1999, sentencing him to 4 years in absentia and fining him 1 million French francs, and he wasn't present because he had already fled. A Delaware Superior Court convicted him of perjury and evidence tampering in October 1996, but Parretti fled to Italy before sentencing could be carried out. A 1998 U.S. federal indictment charged him with conspiracy, falsifying records, and securities fraud, and those charges remain pending to this day, decades later. Parretti's partner, Florio Fiorini, pleaded guilty in 2001 to conspiracy and securities fraud, receiving 41 months in prison and a $100,000 fine. The French bank Crédit Lyonnais, which had secretly financed the MGM acquisition through a Dutch subsidiary in violation of banking regulations, paid a $4 million penalty in 1999 after admitting its role in the fraud, and the bank had essentially enabled someone they should have known was unqualified to take over one of cinema's legendary studios. The MGM takeover demonstrated how easily someone with the right connections and enough audacity could infiltrate Hollywood's highest levels, even without legitimate credentials or actual resources. Parretti's brief reign left MGM in shambles and showed the industry's vulnerability to sophisticated international fraud. Cutthroat Island remains one of cinema's most spectacular financial disasters, and the 1995 pirate adventure carried a budget of $98 million, but earned just $10 million domestically. When you factor in global marketing costs, the total loss reached approximately $147 million, and the film effectively destroyed Carolco Pictures. Criminal investigations surrounding Carolco involved far more than one bad movie because the IRS launched investigations as early as 1988 into what they called Byzantine financing structures and generous executive loans. All 3 top executives eventually became subjects of federal criminal investigation. Peter Hoffman, the company's president and CEO, carried the reputation in Hollywood as the guru of offshore tax havens. His 1997 federal trial involved 4 felony tax fraud charges, and prosecutor Patrick Fitzgerald argued that Hoffman had received unreported income totaling more than $1 million. The trial ended with Hoffman acquitted on 2 counts, while the jury deadlocked on 2 others, and he eventually pleaded guilty to 1 misdemeanor and paid a $5,000 fine. Federal prosecutors later called Hoffman the one who got away. Co-founder Mario Kassar faced IRS demands for over $68 million in back taxes and penalties. And after Hoffman's acquittal, the criminal investigation was abandoned while Kassar paid an undisclosed amount in settlement. Co-founder Andrew Vajna had left Carolco in 1989 with approximately $100 million and settled for $6.5 million in back taxes with no penalties attached. The core allegations involved using company loans for art and real estate purchases that were never reported as income, plus offshore tax havens, including something called the Dutch Sandwich, a scheme using Dutch and Netherlands Antilles shell corporations to hide money from tax authorities. Peter Hoffman's story didn't end there, and in 2015, a federal jury convicted him on 21 counts of conspiracy, mail fraud, and wire fraud for defrauding Louisiana of $1.13 million in film tax credits. He had submitted false claims for a mansion converted to a post-production facility, and U.S. Attorney Kenneth Polite stated that Hoffman used sophisticated means and abused positions of trust in committing these felonies and committed perjury during the trial. Battlefield Earth represented John Travolta's passion project, a science fiction epic based on Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard's novel. The film earned just $30 million against a declared budget of $75 million when it released in 2000. Critics demolished it, audiences avoided it, and it swept the Razzie Awards, but the financial disaster hid an even bigger scandal. Court testimony would later reveal that the actual budget amounted to $44 million, not $75 million. Franchise Pictures had fraudulently inflated the budget by $31 million to deceive their investors. German investment partner Entertainment AG filed a $225 million fraud lawsuit in December 2000, and the Wall Street Journal reported that the FBI was probing whether some independent motion picture companies have vastly inflated the budget of films in an effort to scam investors. $119 million across 10 different films, that's what the investigation revealed Franchise Pictures had inflated in total budgets. A jury awarded Entertainment $121.7 million in damages in June 2004, with $77 million assessed against CEO Elie Samaha personally. RICO claims that would have trebled the damages were rejected, and Franchise Pictures filed for bankruptcy in August 2004. Here's the remarkable part: despite the FBI investigation and federal grand jury subpoenas, no criminal charges were ever filed against Samaha. He walked away from a $121 million civil judgment without serving a single day behind bars, and he even returned to producing by co-founding Luminosity Entertainment in 2021. Sometimes the system simply fails to deliver accountability. The Wolf of Wall Street might be the most ironic entry on this list because Martin Scorsese's 2013 film about financial fraud and excess was itself financed with money stolen in what became a $4.5 billion global embezzlement scheme, the largest case of its kind in history in money laundering. Goldman Sachs banker Roger Ng got 10 years in March 2023 for his involvement in the bond fraud, while his colleague Tim Leissner received 2 years plus $43.7 million in forfeiture in May 2025. Former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak faced conviction on corruption charges and received a 12-year sentence, later reduced to 6. Red Granite Pictures paid $60 million in a civil settlement in March 2018, and Goldman Sachs itself, one of Wall Street's most prestigious institutions, paid nearly after a criminal subsidiary plea. The alleged mastermind of the entire scheme, a Malaysian financier named Joe Low, remains a fugitive reportedly hiding in Shanghai. Over $1.1 billion, that's what the DOJ has recovered for the Malaysian people. This case represents what real in Hollywood's criminal history. Director Carl Eric Rinch's 47 Ronin released in 2013 and lost Universal an estimated $120 to $175 million on a budget of $175 to $225 million. making it one of the decade's biggest flops. Rinch's criminal troubles came from what happened afterward. Netflix signed Rinch to produce a sci-fi series called White Horse, paying him $44.3 million upfront. Then in March 2020, at his request, Netflix sent an additional $11 million, and instead of completing the production, Rinch transferred the money to personal brokerage accounts. Over half disappeared within 2 months on failed options trades, and he invested in cryptocurrency, including Dogecoin. Multiple Rolls-Royces and a Ferrari filled his garage. Most bizarrely, approximately $1 million went to mattresses and luxury bedding. December 2025 brought a guilty verdict on all counts, wire fraud, money laundering, and 5 counts of engaging in monetary transactions from unlawful activity. Sentencing is scheduled for April 2026. Actor Zachary Horwitz, who performed under the screen name Zach Avery, operated what became Hollywood's largest Ponzi scheme. $690 million, that's what he raised from investors between 2015 and 2019 by claiming he acquired film distribution rights for licensing to HBO and Netflix. The pitch sounded completely legitimate, and the contracts he showed investors looked professionally prepared and entirely real. There existed just one devastating problem because neither HBO nor Netflix had any agreements with Horwitz whatsoever. He had forged distribution contracts complete with fictional signatures from executives who had never heard of him. The prosecutor captured the depth of the betrayal in court with these words. He began by betraying the trust of his own friends, people who lowered their guard because they could not possibly imagine that someone they had known for years would unflinchingly swindle them and their families out of their life savings. 20 years in federal prison and an order to pay $230,361,884 in restitution. That's what Horwitz received in February 2022. It stands as the largest fraud sentence in Hollywood history. Unlike so many others on this list who escaped meaningful consequences, Horwitz will spend 2 decades behind Mirror's image and its financial reality. The entertainment industry's opacity, with complex financing structures, subjective valuations, and international co-productions, creates fertile ground for fraud, and prosecutorial resources rarely match the scale of losses. Eli Samaha walked free despite a $121 million civil charge. The executives who enabled billions in fraud often faced lighter consequences than street-level offenders. The 1MDB case stands apart because over $1.1 billion was recovered, including a prime minister and Goldman Sachs bankers, and prison sentences reached 14 years. That represents what real accountability looks like. But for most of Hollywood's criminal history, such alignment has proven extraordinarily rare. These films remind us that in Hollywood, the biggest disasters don't always happen on screen, and sometimes the real story unfolds when the cameras stop rolling and the accountants start asking questions.